Welcome to Spotlight, and we're here with John Carrington.
Oh yeah, I'm having a good time, man.
So we have a lot of activity in the room, but what brings you here?
Well, first of all, my first contact was a year ago. I happened to be a part of a awards program. In fact, it was 2 years ago. There was an awards presentation, and one of the recipients was my neighbor, Miss Rich of Rich Roofing. She was receiving an award, and I'm sitting there getting ready to do some interviews, and here she comes, with family and friends, and she lives right across the street from me, and she owns Rich Roofing. She got an award for being one of the outstanding African-American women in business in the Baltimore area. And so from that point forward, I got a chance to speak with Mr. Bernard Jennings and several of the persons who are associated with J4P Associates. And I realized that they are doing a lot to help build up the image of Baltimore City. They work with community groups, businesses, and community associations to make a better environment. They manage properties, and they try to make the environment safer and more productive for everybody who lives in Baltimore City. We're talking businessmen and community residents. And so my enthusiasm for J4P has grown to the point that I'm back here doing more interviews. I just love it.
We'll be right back after this.
Hi, how are you doing? We're going to thank you for coming out this afternoon to the 7th Annual Black History Month event here at the Talmadge Branch building. This has been put on for the last 7 years by Peter Handel, the J4P Associates, and Mr. Handel will address us at the end of the presentation this morning, and we'll have lunch right after that. I'm Charles Stutz. I'm a member of the J4P team and council member here in this district, and we have a great and distinguished three-person panel. And our theme this day is 50 years after the March on Washington for equality and jobs, equality, freedom.
Welcome back. We're here with Bernard Jennings. So Bernard, Mr. Jennings, could you tell me a little bit about J4P Association?
J4P Associates is a company out of New York that's been a public-private partner with the state of Maryland for 25 years. In fact, this is the 25th year. They own the East Side State Complex. And Peter Handel is the visionary that leads the company. And they've invested in the real estate here, in the community here. And it's profitable for him, it's profitable for the community, and it's profitable for the employees. And Peter likes to talk about the win-win-win, and that's what it's all about. This neighborhood was in a state of disarray and deterioration as a consequence of the riots after the assassination of Dr. King. In fact, this very building was an old Sears and Roebuck store, huge Sears and Roebuck store that was destroyed during the riots. And now you see it's a vibrant facility for about 1,500 people.
Well, tell us, what is going to happen here today?
This is the 7th annual Black History Month event that's been put on by Peter Handel and J4P Associates. Today's event just happens to coincide with the year that the March on Washington took place, so we thought it would be fitting to have a discussion led by Chief Judge Bell and other members who were a part of the civil rights movement in terms of the impact of that movement on Maryland and the nation as it relates to civil rights. So we couldn't have thought of a more fitting title, a more fitting time to have such an event.
Okay. And the march, do you think, in retrospect, do you think is what was the impact of it?
Well, I'll leave it to the experts. I mean, I thought it was a wonderful, transformative thing to happen, but I'm not qualified to talk about the details of it. I know that I benefited from it. I know that lots of African Americans benefited from it, and that the Voting Rights Act was passed as a consequence of it. Barriers in the corporate world, barriers in the public sector broke down. Some of them did, and I think society as a whole benefited from this. It's not just one race of people. It's not, certainly not me, but The benefits manifested themselves in many, many ways in terms of barriers being broken down in public places and private places. Racial attitudes changed. A lot of things opened up for African Americans that were solidly closed before. And certainly President Barack Obama wouldn't have been in office had not it been for that kind of, those kinds of activities that took place in the 60s.
Okay. Now, what is J4P doing for the younger generation who look at civil rights as a thing of the past and not present, like the younger generations of kids?
Well, J4P is a company, a for-profit company, but I think the investments in the community have benefited in many, many ways, economically, from the aesthetic standpoint, from transforming a neighborhood that was blighted, boarded up, drug-infested, to a vibrant state complex that employs 1,500 people. And as a consequence of that, you have collateral businesses that are successful. Otherwise, this very building would have probably remained boarded up as a consequence of the riots after the assassination of Dr. King. So that's the extended side of the public-private partnership that's in play.
Now, do you want to leave the viewers with any last thoughts?
The thoughts are the importance of a public-private partnership. A sustaining relationship that helps to transform communities is vitally important. The government can't do it all, private sector can't do it all, but together you can make a difference in the lives of a community and consequently the people.
Okay, well, thank you, Bernard Jennings, and we'll be right back.
Developing or had developed over time among the black community and also among the greater community in terms of trying to move us from the point where there was two societies to one where there was a more integrated society. Now that all started, I mean, everybody knows about Charles Hamilton Houston and Thurgood Marshall and what they did with regard to the educational system, how they started way back in the 30s with a strategy to desegregate higher education and ultimately education in general, with the idea that that would then trickle down and integrate the entire society. What people don't know probably about that situation is that the whole Brown against Board decision was begun right here in Maryland. In fact, it was begun right here in Baltimore. Most people don't know about the case of Donald Gaines Murray against the University of Maryland Law School. Donald Gaines Murray was a student who had, I guess he graduated from, and I can never get this right, it was either Princeton or Cornell. And he wanted to go to law school. Thurgood had not been able to go to the University of Maryland Law School, not because he applied and was rejected, but because he knew the lay of the land when he came out of Douglas High School. But Thurgood, Donald Gaines Murray wanted to go. And he asked Thurgood if he would represent him. Thurgood consulted with Charles Hamilton Houston, and they agreed to take the case. Case was decided, was filed in the old Mitchell Courthouse, downtown.
Welcome back. We're here with Dr. Helena Hicks, and I want to thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for asking me.
Okay. And how do you think the program went today, especially since you was actually on the panel?
Oh, I think it went very well. It was very spontaneous in many ways, not stilted at all. The audience seemed to be involved and their responses were good. And I actually enjoyed it, and usually as a participant you don't enjoy the program as much, but I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
And you touched about a little of the, you actually graduated from Morgan University.
Yes, I graduated from Morgan.
And from the panel, I guess it's the school you graduated from, because it seemed like
everybody went to Morgan was originally a private Methodist college. That's what it was when I went there. And it changed over to a state institution sometime in the 60s. But it has been around for many, many years, and it was well known, not just all over the country, all over the world, because Morgan had a reputation for bringing students in from countries all over, especially Africa. So I went to school with people from everywhere.
Okay. Now, me listening to you, I did not know the history of Morgan, how it was so instrumental in the civil rights movement. I did not know that, so I want to thank you for letting me know that.
Yes, yes.
And I want to know, so you touched a little bit on it during the program, but what inspired you to want to make a change?
Well, I think when you come up in a family, first of all, Baltimore has that reputation. If you read the history of Baltimore and you go all the way back to the days when, even before Frederick Douglass, but it'll just start at Frederick Douglass since that's a familiar name, and his strike with the waterfront, on the waterfront, over wages and the difference in wages between black Quakers and white Quakers. So you're going there way, way back. You're going back to before the Civil War, and that we have had this protest for rights, and sometimes it was racial protests. It wasn't always racial protests, but it was always Baltimoreans. Baltimore got to be Baltimore because of their protests against Baltimore County, and they pulled out from under Baltimore County. I think it's the only city in the country that isn't in a county. It stands on its own. That was 1787. So we've always had this reputation of protesting. Morgan, being a part of the city for so many years, of course, that's ingrained in it, and if you're from Baltimore, you grow up with that kind of knowledge that you have to fight for your rights and you have to fight against injustices.
Yeah, well, thank you for joining us today, Dr. Hicks, and congratulations on retirement. I can't wait till that day I can retire.
I've been retired a long time. Well, you know, there's a time for everything. I'm not retired in the sense that I'm still busy doing things. I'm just retired in the sense that I don't have to get up and be somewhere 9 o'clock in the morning, 5 days a week. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Dr.
You're quite welcome. Oh, that people are still interested in what got us to the place we are now. I think people, especially young people, take for granted the rights and the freedom of movement they have at this point in time. Those of us sitting before you know when it was not always that way. When I was at Morgan had a reputation, as Judge Bell said, of social justice activity. And we continued that. That was continued with every class. So when I came to Morgan, I already knew about the efforts of the 1942-43 class that picketed the Ford's Theater and the Hippodrome and all downtown. Because I lived in the traditional African-American community off of Judell Avenue and Pennsylvania Avenue, and they were my older brothers and sisters, my parents' friends, and so forth, so I knew about it. My parents were involved in some of those activities.
Hi, I'm Kennedy Clark. We're here with Michelle Brown. Michelle Brown, please tell me
I work with Senator McCloskey. I'm a community outreach liaison.
Okay. What do you do for her?
I'm her eyes and ears in the community. I serve the faith-based community, African American community. Basically, I'm wherever she needs me to be, and I do whatever she needs me to do.
And, so just tell me some of her views on, I guess, Maryland as a whole.
Well, Maryland being a home, she loved it. That's the first thing. Baltimore being a home. Her family was around here. So she loves Baltimore. She loves community. She's always working to better the community. As a social worker, starting from working with child welfare, she has a strong desire to make things better for young people, but then it goes on further to the adults, making sure that adults can get a better education after high school. Great in high school, we want to make sure they have it and it's accessible to everybody.
Now, do you have, she has any upcoming events or upcoming policies or things she's working on? Like, what's her main focus right now?
Right now, their main focus is getting through the suppression. So with her being new as a head of chairwoman of appropriations, that's a whole new task for her, getting that office set. But right now, we're going through the budget. That's her main focus right now.
So you said the center's big focus is on kids and the youth. So what is she doing with the youth? What's the plan to help the youth?
Now, I'm going to be perfectly honest. You may need to edit this. I don't work on the legislative side. Okay. I'm in the community. Right. I would say as far as our young people, right now, I'm trying to make sure that our young people had access to medical care, which is a big problem, a major issue in Baltimore City. Making sure that they can get a decent education past high school, because a lot of times they can't afford affordability is a problem. And making sure they not only get the affordability of quality education, the HBCUs, should make sure there's some funding there to make sure we bring everybody up to par. There is so much that she's doing, it's a lot hard to say. Like I said, I'm her eyes and ears, so a lot of times she can't be everywhere. So a lot of times I'm at events with young people. We discussed, I was at an event where they did a Black History Month event at one of the schools, and they wanted to know what her thing was on history, and I talked about her relationship with Victorine Adams and the people that she worked close with in the community, and she said Miss Adams gave her a lot of input. She was in the city council, so she, like I said, she's very close with young people and seniors. Being caring about everybody, but making sure that we start with our young people, make sure they excel and become the best that they can be. She's the longest serving woman in Congress, and she now just became the first chairwoman of appropriations. She's a very powerful woman, and another way that people, younger people, I'm going to say people in college can get is become interns. There's an intern process. We also have the academy process, which is done every November. And so the young people can apply for military academies, and they get an interview with our office to get nominations. So that's a big part. So it starts like in June and it ends in November, and by December 1st of January, they get a recommendation from her for the academy.
To register for the internship?
The internships you go to the center's website, polsky.center.gov. They're also activities on there for younger children if their parents take them to the website. So I encourage you to go to a website, and go to a website you can sign up for newsletters and find out what she's doing now, past, and present, future.
So, Ms. Brown, do you have any last words that you want to tell our viewers?
Again, I just, right now, I would tell you the best way to learn about the center is to go to our website, sign up for a newsletter. She likes to know what's going on, and the best way that we can get to you, we have e-comms, which is an email communications, a newsletter. So I encourage you to go and sign up, and thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you, Ms. Brown, for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll be right back after this.
In 1922, on his deathbed, he called my grandfather Carl, who was a professor of German at Howard University, having graduated from Harvard and from University of Germany in Jena, and he said to him, I want you to stop teaching school, and I want you to come and run the family newspaper. There's one stipulation: whatever money you make, no matter how small it is, there are 10 of you. Everybody's to get the same salary, whether they work in the business or not. And he said, I want you to remember that a newspaper succeeds because it believes first in God, then in itself, and in the present generation. And so Carl Murphy left Howard University at the year that his father died in 1922, and he served as the publisher of the newspaper through 1967 when he died here in Baltimore. Now, unlike his father, Carl Murphy didn't have any sons. He had all daughters. He had 5 daughters, and I couldn't figure out for the longest why he would call them Johnny and Frankie. Well, my mother was Frankie, but he wanted boys. He figured he would just call them. And when, and I'm jumping around a little bit, when World War II came, however, and most of the men of the family went to war, the women of the family ran the newspaper. I marvel, I have a couple of these, and I want to give one of these to this young man, Kennedy, here. This is the 120th that I think is the youngest in the room. I want to give this one to him. I'm always, I looked through the 120th edition of the paper, and we talked about things that happened long before 1963. We can look and see front page reprints from 1915, 1908. So there have been fights for equality that have just been ongoing, and so the paper was a champion, or still is a champion for civil rights.
Welcome back. We're here with Professor. Tell our viewers what's your name.
My name is Nathan C. Irby Jr.
So, I like that. So, sir, how did you like the program today?
I think it's a significant effort on the part of J4P to do something of this nature, to reflect back on yesterday. It's so important because it's given us a format of where we're going in the future.
Okay. And you also said you were an activist back in the civil rights.
No, I don't. They use the terminology of activist. I was just a plain troublemaker because I just felt very strongly about the injustice that we were incurring in our neighborhoods.
So how did you get started? Like, what made you say, I'm gonna do something to change?
I really got started. I was a postal employee. And a lady, children were being seized on Milliman Street. And I just thought it was awful. And we rallied about 200 or 300 people, I would say, in the course of an hour. And we went to the courthouse on downtown. And I remember the judge simply said to us, "Who's the spokesman for this group?" And right away everybody said, "Irby." There I was. And that's I believe that's the time that stopped. And at that point we prevailed, and the lady won every aspect of the problem that she had. That's how it started. And as a result of that, we moved then to housing. We became housing activists. And that particular time, in the 60s, it was called open housing, fair housing. And we would go to the state of Maryland, everywhere we would go where we felt our voice should be heard. And we dealt with the problems of housing and other social injustices we were carrying in our neighborhoods.
Okay. And during the ceremony, the question was asked, do you feel that we're better off now than we were then? And how do you feel about that?
It's a problem of evolution, and I don't believe people want to deal with evolution. You can move forward today and you go back 2 steps tomorrow, then the next day you move 4 steps forward. It's evolution, and I think that people are beginning to realize now social injustice entails economic justice as well. And I think we, as I see it, I thought we did a good job in terms of advancing the social cause. But I'm also reminded of one factor that we didn't take into consideration, and that was the economic cause. Because if you get the economics, the other stuff falls in place.
So being a troublemaker back in the civil rights movement.
I like that.
So how did you feel when President Obama got elected and reelected?
Well, to be quite honest with you, when at that particular point I was involved heavily in politics. I'd been a city councilman for 8 years. I've been a state senator for 12 years, and I just felt that I heard Obama 4 years prior when he gave that dynamic speech at the convention. No idea this guy would ever be advanced to the level of the presidency of the United States. When I heard that, I initially went with he was going to join the race. I said, wait a minute, let me go with a winner. And I said, I'm going with Hillary Clinton. I went with Hillary Clinton. And after the Iowa caucus, and here's a guy who won the Iowa caucus, where you're talking about 96% white and a minimum of 4% black, and he won the Iowa caucus. The next day I looked at my choice and I said, oh no, I got to go with this guy. He's got a chance. Even if you don't have a chance, it's reminiscing of the biblical version of John the Baptist before Jesus Christ. And that's how I saw that. And lo and behold, I got on his bandwagon and he won. Now, to be quite honest with you, I thought he was going to have tremendous problems winning re-election. And certainly we supported him 100%, but I had some concerns. But my concerns were dismissed one evening that I went to a meeting. And the lady she could hardly get around. And she said, I don't care what other people do, but I'm going to get out and vote for my boy. That was Barack Obama. And I said to myself, if that lady at her age made that kind of commitment and she had that kind of belief, then I should share it with her. And that's when I just felt like he was going to win. Had no idea he would win by the margin, but I was delighted. And I think even to this day, there's total disrespect for the presidency of the United States from certain groups in America. And I listened to the argument currently about our children. We don't want to indebt our children. Aren't those the same people that put us in debt? You know, and I think about that as well. And then lastly, I just want to point out, I don't care what transpires in this society. There's an ultimate force, the maker of all things, and I'm convinced that he will do what is right for all of us.
Now, one more question.
Go ahead.
So, the question was asked, are we better off now than we were today? Well,
And I go back to evolution again. I think we were activists socially when we should also have been activists for the economic side of the equation. I said it early on, you gain the economics and the others fall in place. We didn't do that. And that was a lesson that I learned in over 40 years of involvement with the strike. And I think it's going to be, in the end, the best thing that's going to happen for America is transpiring at this point. The best thing that's happened right now for America, a society that's all-inclusive. And I think that's the best thing that could have ever happened. And I think that's the message that you go throughout the world, that this is a country of inclusion, not exclusion.
I think that's really, you can really identify it with the fact that they say that Hillary Clinton might be the next president of the United States.
Well, I think she is going to be the next president. Let me do, and I heard somebody, I think it was Eric March, talking about Martin Luther being more than a minister. He was a prophet because he predicted things. I'm going to make a prediction. I'm going to say it's going to be Hillary Clinton, and behind Hillary Clinton is going to be a Hispanic. Because I believe the progression is going in that direction. Black, woman, and another man of color, or woman of color. Got to be politically correct by saying no, again, like I said, I think there are those of us who have did well for ourselves and for some of our families and some of our neighbors. There are those of us who have actually stood still, haven't progressed at all. And there is a segment of the population that I believe has regressed. So what you have to do now is come up with a formula. Again, going back to my keyword is, how do you include everybody in that formula and make it work for the whole? I think we are bad off, but we're not well off.
Well, thank you. I want to thank you for joining us, Mr. Elder.
Always a pleasure.
All right.